Hello, it's Cameron again, founder of Stylecraft and a pro motion designer with 2 decades, that's right, 2 decades of experience. Welcome to video number 2 of my workshop, How to Design Style Frames. Now, in this video, I'm going to teach you how to easily lay out that style frame or style frames, I should say, and build something that looks dope. And more importantly, this video is going to help you build a solid design foundation for your frames because if your base level design isn't dope, it will never look pro. So if you're a junior motion designer, but you aren't sure how you can lay out assets to create style frames, or you're a mid-level motion designer looking to really up your style frame design skills, you'll discover how motion designers like you and me can easily lay out dope style frames and why it's critical that you focus on this right now. So in video 1, we talked about a simple process for concepting and creating design assets. I shared how this is going to immediately help you lay a solid foundation for style frame design. So if you haven't seen that video, go back right now and watch it, and then come back to this video. It's critical that you watch video number 1 first. Anytime you're trying to build style frames, it's inevitable that you are going to hit roadblocks. You might have experienced some of them already. Things like, where do I start? The images, the type, what do I start with? Or maybe it's imposter syndrome, telling yourself, I am not a designer. And then you start to wonder, how am I going to make this actually look good? You start trying to figure out the end result before even starting. Well, here's what I know to be true. If any of this sounds familiar, it's totally normal. So in this video, I'm going to make it easy for you. I'll help you avoid these usual headaches by showing you the simple steps I follow to easily build style frame foundations, which will save you lots of time and frustration. So let's get into the meat and potatoes of today's video and let's lay out some solid style frame foundations. Are you ready? Okay, so here we are inside of After Effects. And believe it or not, this is where I like to design. Okay. I prefer to design inside of After Effects for many different reasons. A few of them are that After Effects is non destructive, unlike Photoshop. Photoshop's getting better at it. But you have to duplicate layers inside of Photoshop. There's some workarounds, but for the most part, After Effects is non-destructive, so I can do things to the layers, and it's the original is still there, right? That's destructive. That's non-destructive. Sorry. Also, there's so many effects and things like that inside of After Effects, whereas in Photoshop, you're limited. Okay. Now I do use Photoshop for certain things, like if I have to do like some serious cutting out of elements, I'm going to use Photoshop for that. If I don't feel like I can easily cut something out with a mask tool here in After Effects. So that's just a little bit of disclaimer about designing here in After Effects. Okay. So you're going to notice that I've got a very wide composition here, and this is 2540 by 1080. It's a ratio of 2.35. Which is what I decided to do because I wanted to make this more cinematic. Now, there's no right or wrong ratio here, okay? It's just how I'm choosing to design my frames. That doesn't mean that you can't design at HD, which a lot of times I do design at HD or 4K. It also depends on your client, right? If your client says we need a frame at this resolution, you're going to design at that resolution. So I'm just doing this for cinematic reasons because I want a very wide screen look. 2540 by 1080. I'm going to change the duration to 1 second because I'm designing here in After Effects. Length doesn't matter because I'm not animating this. Okay, if I was animating this, I'd obviously want to make the composition the length for that, but doesn't matter with animation, so I'm making it 1 second. So I want to show you two concepts here, so this is going to be a little bit longer. So let's move into the textures here. And let's find a grid texture here. This is the one I really liked. Like it a lot. And I'm just going to kind of position it something like this because I thought it'd be really interesting to use this as kind of like my layout, right? So these lines can help divide things up. And, I could do something like that where it's more in thirds, but I kind of want this line over here because it looks interesting to have like an interesting, it almost like it looks like an old film frame over there. And let's go into, at this point, I just really like to start playing around, right? Now you can see in this image I found in the concepting phase, I really like how this also is divided up into images. I'm also looking at the ground plane here. So maybe something like that. And then I'm going to set it to not overlay. That's too intense. But the other thing too is when I'm playing around with transfer modes like this, I also don't. So I'll leave it at add for now. I'm not going to sit here and spend a lot of time trying to get this just right. I want it to look okay, and then I'm going to start adding layers to it, and then that's when I'll kind of do my polish at the end to make it look all nice and tidy. Let's see what else we have here. We've got the clouds. Yeah, that might be kind of cool up in here or something. Again, maybe I'll just go to a quick. Yeah, that doesn't do much. Yeah, we'll just leave it how it is, okay? And we're just gonna scale this guy down. Just want it to be something subtle. I don't know yet. I do like that plane that we were playing around with. Maybe this one. And we'll do I keep getting so black multiply is to get rid of the whites. I always get those backwards. I don't know. That's pretty dark. So then what I'd do here is I'd hold down Alt or Option, click and drag, and it just replaces my image like so. And I don't know. It may be too much. It's really dark, but I'll leave it there for now. I like the elements. I know that over here I want to do like this atomic kind of thing. So something I played around with was like, okay, well, I could put the president over in here, something like that. I mean, it looks pretty good. So maybe I'll leave them there for now. I'll just switch it to overlay. No, soft light. Too gritty, way too gritty, right? I'll turn that off for now. I'm not sure if I'm going to leave it or not. I'm going to go ahead and turn it off. I'm going to lock it. And that says, hey, don't delete this because I kind of liked where that was going. So let's keep that in mind. Let's see here. We got some nice tape here. These are interesting. I really like this one here. So I'm just going to draw a quick little mask around this guy. So I can just use this one. If I want to get really serious about this, I'm going to hit Y. I'm going to take this anchor point and drag it in here. And this is just so that like if I do things like rotation, it's going to rotate on close to the center point of this piece of tape. Don't have to be perfect, right? It's just a little bit simpler approach here. Yeah, probably somewhere in there. I'm also, just for fun, I'm just making this about like a title sequence. We all love titles, right? So I'm gonna call this film. Well, I'll say editor. Editor. And in my testing, I found I liked Times New Roman a lot. So that's great. I'm gonna duplicate that one, bring it over here, and we'll make this guy's name Josh Apple. Sure. Now, something I teach in Stylecraft, I teach all this kind of stuff, but something I teach in Stylecraft specifically is about typography. And there's some general rules to typography that you need to be aware of when designing. One of them states that there's a hierarchy for typography to like understand how to read it. And there's different rules to that. But one of them is because editor is a size 50, then Josh Apple is more important. So I'm going to double the size of that to 100. Okay. And you can see the way that they're aligned here is that there's definitely more emphasis on Josh Apple here. Now, it's also easy to make things too big in motion design. So I'm actually going to let's actually parent Josh Apple to editor. And let's just scale editor down. And by doing this, it's keeping the relationship between the small piece of type and the larger piece of type. It's keeping them aligned how I had them. So maybe something like that. There's a little bit of visual disruption, I guess I would call it, with this line of tape here overlapping this J, and it kind of bugs me a little bit. But for now, we're going to keep it. That's one thing about designing is you're going to see certain things will really start to bug you, and if they're bugging you, that means you probably need to do something about it. So let's go back up in here into Atomic Bomb. Now, I thought this image was super cool, but yeah, actually, that's one we're going to use. So it's a okay size. We're going to set it to not overlay. We'll set it to screen. Yeah. And it's cool to see some color here, but for now, I want to keep everything kind of in the general same vein of color. And that's just, it helps me design, right? So the easy way to do that is just go up here to color correction, and I'm just going to say black and white, and boom, there we go. It's black and white, and it already, everything's blending together a little bit nicer here. I could play around with things like, the scale to bring it more into frame or less to bring it smaller, but I actually like where it's sitting here. So I'm just going to take my mask tool here, and I'm just going to align it with this line and just kind of do something like that, right? Now, a tool that we can use to readjust this is Y again. So if I hit Y, this is called the pan behind tool, which you can also access up here, pan behind. And I can click and I can drag, and my mask is going to stay in the same place, but I'm able to kind of reposition where the image is. Now, if I go to scale this up, right? If I go to scale it up, it's going to affect the mask. So then at this point, I'd have to just kind of redo the mask, that kind of junk. But that right there is looking pretty good to me. I'm also going to come over here, and I'm really into redacted text right now, which is why I brought in some of this redacted text that I downloaded. And I'm going to drag this over here. I'm going to make sure I switch back to my selection tool, which is V. So V looks like this. Actually, thinking about this, you probably can't see this because I replaced my mouse cursor with a circle so you can more easily follow what I'm doing. But just trust me on this. V is selection, Y is the pan behind tool. So for this guy, I'm actually going to bring this up quite a bit larger. And let's go ahead and just take the mask tool here. I'm going to divide this image up into two different design elements. Okay, so this is one. And let's go ahead and just Command D to duplicate it. And we'll bring this one over here. And for this one, I want to do the opposite. I'm going to take the top half of this. I'm kind of looking to see what's in here. Maybe, I don't know, maybe this right here. But I also want it to be smaller. I don't want these to look like they were both from the same document. So an easy way to do that is just this is scaled to 231%. Let's just scale this one down. And you can see what I'm doing. I'm just playing around with, different sizes and things like that. So, and let's also rotate, I don't know, just to take it off I don't want everything to be straight aligned, right? So we'll go and we'll take it to multiply. Now you can't see that. So what would make it more interesting is if it was the opposite. If it was white type, right? So the easy way to do that is just go to effect, channel, and invert. Now it's white type, so we need to change it from multiply to screen. So think of multiply and screen as two separate, they're opposites of each other. Okay. So that's looking pretty good. Maybe too much of a rotation. Doesn't have to be much, right? Just a little bit. And I think I want the cloud to be on top of everything. So you'll see here in my layer palette or my timeline that everything is using the name of how I brought it in here. So we can just hit return and we can actually change this to like spy plane. And this is clouds. So we'll call it clouds. And this is the rocket. And this is the background texture. Perfect. That's tape. We know that. That's the bomb. So that's looking pretty good. Let's do the same thing to this letter here. Let's go to effect. No, it's the last effect we used was invert, so it's found right here. So we'll do invert, and then we'll change this to multiply screen. Maybe something like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that hydrogen bomb, I'm going to hit Y, and I'm going to bring it up. Maybe something like that. So it's almost like there's this document now that's explaining this hydrogen bomb image. I also like to play around with some other imagery here. So like the gun could be kind of cool. Let's go ahead and make it color correction black and white. Let's set it to screen. And like this is what I like to do is just kind of move things around and just kind of see, like, is that kind of working? Maybe not. It might be too much, right? It's too big. Maybe something like that, but it feels a little bit crowded down in here. So that may not work. Okay, so let's try a couple things here. Let's move this. Let's actually scale it back up a little bit. And I'm going to bring off some of this text here. That'd be kind of interesting to overlap these two a little bit. Maybe actually even bring it up more. I really like this cursive here, and this top secret being over the rocket here is kind of nice. But I don't need all of that type. And then let's go ahead and let's fix this plane. And I have an idea here. Let's go ahead and bring the clouds back in. Where'd they go? Miscellaneous cloud. Yeah, let's bring this guy in here. And there we go. So bringing that cloud in here brings that plane. So remember, this is without the cloud. And the plane was just too contrast, not enough contrast. I take that back. Contrast I teach in Stylecraft, okay? You got to have contrast. So just dropping these clouds in immediately provides that contrast for this plane here. Now I can see the edges a little bit more distinctly. So we're going to go back to color correction levels and just get rid of some of that. I think there might be too much cloud cover now. So, and I like that darkness back there. So let's actually, I really like these clouds a lot. So we'll just kind of play around here a little bit. Maybe, yeah. Let's actually rotate these guys 180 degrees. Because I don't want to take away from the mushroom cloud here, but I do like this texture that they're bringing in here. I liked it better not rotated, just like that. That's nice. It's just a nice little angle there. And that actually gives me an idea here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to um, duplicate my tape sheet, and I'm going to hit M for mask, and I'm going to delete that mask. And I want to bring in some tape here along the edge. R for rotation. I'm looking at this kind of L-shaped tape here, and that's pretty cool. So what I'm going to do is take my pen tool, something like this. And you can see here, because I took the time during video one, that took the time to concept and really bring in a lot of elements that I could use. I didn't overdo it. That's why things are moving so quickly in this design phase. So I'm just playing around again with the different tapes. Now, I don't like the tapes being so close together here. So I'm going to undo, undo. I'm going to bring a tape a little bit more off the edge here. Remember, they don't have to be like in your face, right? Like the tape doesn't have to be here fully in frame, just a little bit on the edge here. All right. That's all we need. Very nice. This feels a little overpowering in here. And it actually makes me want to try something here where I bring the text down here. Actually, let's undo, undo. Let's just take both of these chunks of text. We're going to duplicate, Command D to duplicate. Okay. And I'm doing this because I really like how they are now. So I'm going to turn those two off. I'm going to lock them. And then I'm going to take these two, make sure they're both selected, go over here to my black, make them black, and grab editor because Josh Apple's connected to that. Make sure these are at the top of the layer stack here. And R for rotation for editor. Something like that. It looks a little too crisp for me, and it's also competing with this type here. So we're going to turn that off. We're actually just going to delete that. I think that this might be too large. It's just too overpowering. So we're going to shrink it down and just kind of bring it down off the page a little bit more here. So maybe we'll bring in a little bit more text. Maybe that's what we'll do. Yeah, that's a little bit better. It's not so overpowering, right here. And then something else I wanted to try with this one is I really liked the whole idea with fingerprints, which I've got some right here. I've got this one, which is huge. So I'll scale that puppy down, change it to multiply. Again, it depends where this fingerprint is, right? And what's the idea behind this fingerprint? Maybe effect, color correction, or channel invert. Change it from multiply to screen. That's nice. We'll go to effect, color correction, black and white to make sure, because you can see there's a little bit of color in there. Turn on the original type there. We're also going to add levels to this, color correction levels. And bring out let's rotate it. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that gun. Actually, that's not too bad, but I think it might be too much. Yeah, it's just a little bit. Let's rotate it. Scale it down a little bit more. It was a really large file. Yeah, that's not bad at all. So I'm going to call this one good. This is good for a rough style frame, right? So you can see, there's some things that need to be done to it to make it really pro level, but it's got a solid base here. And that's where we need to be. We need to create a solid base level design so that when we add our polish to it, it really shines. So I'm leaving this here and we're going to move on to the second concept. So here we are in concept two. And for concept two, um, same kind of deal 2540 by 1080, 24 frames a second. I'll leave it at 72 frames long. And this one I'm going to approach a little differently in the fact that this one can be set up to animate immediately. Okay. So this is what I'm going to call the newspaper concept. And what we're going to do is we are going to start with a texture I found that I really liked the look of. We're going to go black and white again for this approach. So we'll go color correction, black and white. Very nice. We're also going to go ahead and make this 3D. And I'm going to go ahead and just push it way back in Z space, 1,000 pixels. I get OCD about working in 3D space. If you don't understand how to work in 3D space, I would highly recommend checking out 3D camera techniques on YouTube or around the Motion Science website or diving into like AE Academy 1 and 2. They can go into 3D layers as well and pro flows as well. So, but I'm gonna push this back in Z space. I'm gonna change this to views. A lot of times I like to design in 3D space. Okay. I find that 3D space is easier to push elements back and forth and to really just kind of get the depth I'm looking for. So that's what I'm gonna do here. So I'm gonna also create a new camera. And I like to work with one node cameras. We'll go with, we'll leave it at 28. No depth of field necessary. Boom, perfect. I'll go ahead and scale this puppy up. Something like so. Just so that we have it covering the entire frame. Maybe like that. And then I like to just start playing around with all these different newspapers I have. Right. So I'm going to bring this guy in, make him 3D. Immediately make him black and white as well. And looking at this guy, I really like this Japan US at war mask tool and something like that just to crop it. And I'm going to hit V and bring in my mask here. And since it's a 3D layer, I'm going to go ahead and bring it forward in space, hit P for position. And I'll probably just go the opposite. I'll go negative 1,000 forward, something like that. And, I don't know, maybe scale it down a little bit. Something like that. And then I'm just going to start bringing in other elements. Don't absolutely love that because I feel like it doesn't fit some of what's going on here. So maybe might be kind of cool. We'll go ahead and just what I'm doing here. So I've got two views set up because I've got a top view here, and you can see it says top view here. I also could move into custom view, but I like to work top views a lot of times, maybe side views, and then just start kind of moving layers around. So I'm messing with the Z and the X, scaling them up. And then also just finding some interesting points that I like in them. So like for this guy, I really like all of this, including this image. And may or may not work. You never know. Having it cut off. Immediately it looks a little bit weird to me that it's cut off like this, but we'll see. And then we'll bring in another layer here, make it 3D, black and white. Again, maybe pushing this guy back, maybe back over in here, something like that. Leaving it full right now. And let's go another one. Oh, I really like that one. War is over. That's really nice. So maybe we'll do something like so. Make it 3D. And I'm just gonna play around with all these different X, Y, and Z parameters. Something like so. And it looks pretty terrible right now, right? But how we can start to make this look more interesting is by adding a light. So we're going to go into layer, new light, and we're going to use a spotlight. I like to use spotlights and point lights a lot of times. We're going to use a spotlight. We're going to crank up the diffusion. We'll make the darkness 100%, intensity 100. We're going to bring down the cone angle, which the cone angle on a spotlight is, if you think of it, it opens and closes. So you can open up a cone angle on a spotlight up to 180 degrees. So it goes straight across and out. I'm going to kind of close that in to about, well, we'll do 54 degrees. And boom, there it is. And immediately I'm going to go back into two views, and I'm going to zoom out here, and I'm just going to bring this light somewhere in here so that it's casting an interesting light on this, right? But we still don't see a whole lot of depth because none of these newspaper articles are casting shadows. So what we have to do, I'm going to take my camera and light to the top. I'm going to select all of these top layers. I'm going to lock the back layer, and I'm going to hit AA, just like that. And it's going to open up cast shadows, and it defaults to off. But if I click on, they're all going to immediately start casting shadows. And you can see immediately how much more interesting this is to look at with cast shadows enabled, right? So we'll bring this guy in, make him black and white, same process here. And if you want, I don't have to necessarily be masking all these out right now, because what we're trying to do is just kind of get an interesting kind of composition, an interesting vibe going on. And I want to kind of get that before I really start masking and fine tuning things. So again, AA, turn on cast shadows for that guy. And maybe this guy, is closer to the foreground, maybe something like that. And then scale down. I don't know, something like so. I don't know yet. Still not loving this. I absolutely don't like this at all. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that back like so. I just don't like the way it's cut off like that. Something like that. Okay. Now, because this is a style frame about the Cold War, again, I want to include some typography here. I always like to use type when possible on projects. So I'm going to type in the Cold War. And you're going to see that when I dropped in this layer here of type into the 3D layer stack, it's a 2D layer here, it immediately threw things off. So if I delete this, watch the shadows here. See how things kind of got funky there? So I'll talk about this a little bit later, but for now, we're going to make this layer 3D and maybe keep it where it's at in terms of Z space. It's kind of at layer 0. I'm going to change it to a different typeface. And in some testing I did, I found I liked this one called Abolition. There it is. A lot of times I use typefaces and fonts from Adobe Typekit. I don't find that I'm rarely ever buying any typefaces. Between what you can find on Adobe Typekit and what you can find for free, there's a whole lot of choices out there, and they work for me. So let's go ahead and play around with this. Let's actually bring it forward, Z space. And I'm just clicking on Z and dragging it forward, something like that. And I'm going to space out some of this type. Maybe scale it up a little bit. Something like that. I'm going to bring this down. And I'm going to make this type like an interesting red color. I just like the look of black and white versus red. That's looking okay. But something you can do here to really kind of change up the look of type is to add some texture to it. And to do that, we are going to make this layer 3D as well. And we're going to parent this layer to the Cold War layer. And then we're just going to find like some interesting texture, which I really like the texture up in here. I could, I want to avoid the typography for the most part. So we're going to find some interesting texture. And this could be anything. It doesn't have to be a newspaper, but it could be anything. And we're going to say, okay, texture, you need to be alpha matting through the Cold War. Okay. So what we can see here. Now, if you don't understand alpha mats and things like that, again, I would refer you over to AE Academy 1 and 2. We're going to teach you a lot about alpha matting, luma matting, things like that. So right there, we're back to black and white because I made the texture image black and white, and it looks pretty cool. I want a little bit more contrast in there, so we're going to go into color correction, and we're going to go back into levels. Again, you could always use curves. I've been on a levels kick lately, and it's going to make this a little bit more contrasty, I guess. That's what I'm looking for here. Not too much, because the texture just has to be subtle, right? It doesn't have to be too much. So maybe something like that. And then what I can do is I can duplicate the Cold War, bring it down below, turn it back on, and I could say, hey, I want this texture to actually kind of be an overlay mode of that red texture. And let's drop down the saturation of this red. It's really, 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 really red. Make it a lot darker. Something like that for right now. And then I want to see a little bit more of the Cold War. So I'm going to bring my light maybe a little bit more up in here. Actually, I'm going to undo that. I'm going to open up the light here. Transform and point of interest. Just move the X. Don't have to see the whole word, but there you go. Okay, so that's looking pretty cool. I'm gonna go ahead and save this so I don't lose anything. Japan and US, it's a little bit too much in your face. Maybe something like that. And at this point, I'm just going to start playing around with positioning. Oh, I'm going to go ahead and lock that layer. I'm going to lock all the text for now. I'm just going to start playing around with positioning, shadows, things like that. I'm actually going to unlock these layers, and I'm going to bring down the Cold War. I like to use a proportional grid here to get my rule of thirds kind of going on. And that is a point of interest right there. So that's good. If you don't know about proportional grid, the rule of thirds, again, I teach this in Stylecraft. You can go up to preferences, previews. I'm sorry, grids and guides, right here. And we just have to set up a proportional grid of 3 by 3. Click OK, and that's going to give you this. This is a point of interest, point of interest, point of interest, point of interest. And then you can align things to these different lines horizontally and vertically as well. It's a proven design skill or fact that these interest points our eyes are drawn to them. So that's why I'm putting that there. And it doesn't mean you have to like ultimately stick to those points. It's just a good place to start. So again, you see, I took this image up in here. It's okay not to see everything. We don't have to see everything. I don't like how intense the shadow is on this background here. I'm actually going to take my dirty paper here and try something. We'll try and do a channel invert. Yeah, there we go. So see, Now, instead of a white background, it's a much darker background and it looks a lot more interesting. But let me go ahead and lock that. Again, this shadow is too intense back here. It looks like it's just too close to that layer. If I go back to a two view here, you can see, well, there, that's why it is really close to it. So let's bring it forward, maybe in here, and then let's scale it way down so that it kind of gives that illusion of, okay, well, maybe this is farther back in space than we think it is, right? So maybe something like so. And well, it's okay. Let's take a look at this guy. Maybe this one's, somewhere in here, over in here. That's kind of interesting. I don't want to overwhelm my type with imagery here. So maybe something like that. We'll go back and start looking at some of these. That's really nice. I like the extra. So we'll go back to color correction, black and white. We'll make him 3D. And let's go ahead and move this guy somewhere in here. So I just turn on the shadows for this layer. That's pretty cool. Let's go back to our original images again. What is this? AA for shadow. Oh, let's make it 3D. AA for shadows. Cast shadows on. We'll bring this guy forward in space as well. Scale this guy down. And again, I'm just looking at placements here. In the next series of lessons, we're going to really fine tune the look of these because looking at this, you can see obviously that there's very hard edges, right, to these papers, right? And you can tell they're digital papers. Like this one's not so much, but it's got this weird background. But this digital edge, hard edge to it, it just doesn't work, right? It looks too digital. So we need to do some things to soften up the edges and some more things like that. So we will, like I said, get back to that in the next set of videos. But for now, these will work just fine. Just cutting off some of that weird edge there. And I'm trying not to overpower too much here. And again, I'm just looking, I really like the shadows that are being cast here. And I'm making sure to select both layers of text to move them. So I moved them a little bit above my rule of thirds, but that's okay. Like I said, it doesn't have to be exact. Keep coming back there. Really like that image a lot. It's very powerful. It's kind of scary. Let's make them 3D. AA, cast shadows. Perfect. And scale them down. Scale them back up. And I want to put a little bit in right in here. So maybe this guy is what goes back in here. No. This image is just really overpowering. And sometimes this is what happens when you see me, when I feel like I'm struggling right here to kind of get this all solved. But once it does, it'll all kind of come together. And I'm just going to mask this guy, make them black and white, make them 3D, AA, cast shadows, and push this guy back in here. Oh yeah, that's starting to work now. It's looking pretty good. Yeah, I think that might be too much. It's just a little bit too perfect, right? So I'm trying to create like this sense of um, almost like chaos. And I'm going to take both of my, and you can see, guys, what's going on here. I'm playing around with placement of elements and things like that, and just trying to get it to look good. Um, this is really bright, which is why I think that's what's throwing me off about it, right? So let's go into curves, and um, is that affecting anything? No. Let's go into maybe this is why I've been on a levels kick lately. It's just so bright. So let's go into effect, color correction, exposure, and let's just drop the exposure down. So that's a lot better. Just make it a lot darker. And we'll try turning this guy off. Yeah, now it feels like there's too much going on, right? Um, but we'll come back to that when we finalize some of the elements. When we come into the polish, that's where we're really going to like solve some of these problems of too much happening. Um, maybe if I turn that guy, that's not the one I want. Maybe that's too much. It feels really heavy on the left side. So I'm going to kind of break some of these apart a little bit, give it some breathing room. I'm okay with this. Yeah, I'm okay with this one. This is getting better. I talk about how we all want to just keep tweaking and tweaking, but you can see here it didn't take me very long to just create this basic layout, right? So let me just move a couple more around. Let's go here. Yep. And I just keep wanting to move this guy around, huh? Uh, that guy and that guy. Bring them up a little bit more. Yeah, and I'm good. I'm good right there for this style frame. That's going to do it for concept one and concept two. Okay, so let's do a quick review of what we covered today. First, we saw a whole new way to think about how to easily build style frame layouts. And you can use what you've learned here today to immediately help you up your design skills. Plus, you found out how to approach style frame design simplistically so you know how to move through this process quickly. It's been a jammed packed video. So make sure you review what you've learned today and you put this into action right away. Remember that practice makes perfect. Okay. Speaking of taking action, before we go today, please leave me a comment right below this video. In the next video, I'm going to show you the entire process of adding what I call polish to your style frame so you can rock out seriously pro level style frames. This lesson builds on everything we talked about today. And most importantly, it shows how just adding a few simple layers can dramatically, and I mean dramatically, change your frames. So take what you've learned here today and start putting it into practice. Maybe you're just in the beginning stages, or maybe you can apply it right away to some frames that you have in mind. The key thing is to get moving. You'll want to take these small steps, which will get you to where you want to be. Next up, I'm going to share video 3, which helps you finish your style frames out and make them look pro. I'm so excited just knowing what a difference this is going to make for you, and I cannot wait to see you in the next video.